Passion, more than ability or opportunity, determines one's success in life. And passion, more than knowledge or advantage, determines whether one goes to heaven or not. Consider in the introduction 7 quotes about passion and 7 verses about passion. French military strategist Ferdinand Foch said the most powerful weapon on earth is the human soul on fire. Helen Keller said, life is either a daring adventure or it is nothing. William Ward said, enthusiasm and persistence can make an average man superior, and lethargy and negligence can make a superior man average. Nick Nolte said, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. Hegel spoke of the power of passion in saying, nothing great ever happened in the history of the world except by passion. And Albert Einstein said, I have no special talents. I am just extraordinarily passionate. Now consider 7 verses. We must be fervent in spirit, serving the Lord. Romans 12:11. We are to love God with all the soul, heart, mind, and strength. Matthew 22:36-40 and Mark 12:30. Jesus was eaten up with zeal. John 2:17. Apollos was a man fervent in spirit. Acts 18:25. The Corinthian zeal provoked very many. 2 Corinthians 9:2. Whatsoever thy hand finds to do, do it with thy might. Ecclesiastes 9:10. And Paul said, as much as in me is, I am ready to preach the gospel to you who are at Rome also. Romans 1:15. Now, we may view one's journey to heaven as Jacob's ladder. You know, every year is another step on the ladder and equal to the year before and to the year that is to come. And so we're making steady advances toward that eternal city in a straight line. But one's trip to heaven is not usually so uniform as that. It's more like ascending a range of mountains where we go up and then we go back down and then we go up, but we're always making progress and gaining altitude. It's like a bird's flight that may be up and then down and soaring and then, but ultimately lands on the peak. Most of us begin our journey in our youth or at some time earlier in life, and we begin to go toward heaven. But there are days that we are stronger and days that we are weaker. There are seasons of life where our zeal for God may wane, and others where it is fervent and strong. And we must stop and evaluate. There was a mountain climber who was making his way toward the peak, but periodically he would turn and look back down from where he had come. And he was evaluating the distance that he had traveled with his strength to continue to go on. And so it is that on some days, some sermons, we need to open up the book and do some personal evaluation to examine ourselves whether we be in the faith. 2 Corinthians 13:5, and where we are in our journey. So this morning we look at 4 ways to increase spiritual passion. I don't know where you are personally this morning in your personal zeal for God. I suppose an audience of this size that there would be different temperatures all over the room. Some of us may be as on fire for God as we have ever been before. others of us may have even wavered on whether we would attend the service this morning, whether it would be worth it for us, whether we wanted to put in that much effort to get ready and to come to the building and to be a part of these services today. So where are you personally? Maybe no one else really knows, but we know that about ourselves, and we have the opportunity to determine what our spiritual temperature is, to renew our zeal and our faith for God on a regular basis. And sometimes we need just to step back and say, I need an honest evaluation of where I am. And so let's look at 4 ways. And we're using the word way in this title to mean direction, because we're going to look in 4 different directions as we go through the balance of this lesson. Number 1, let's talk about look up. Man's thoughts are not God's thoughts. In the Lord's Supper, we considered Isaiah 55:8, and you can connect 9 with that, which says that God speaking, or the prophet speaking for God to the Israelites, my thoughts are not your thoughts, your ways are not my ways. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my thoughts higher than your thoughts. And so we may give ourselves a pass. We might say, well, that's okay. God's perspective might be different. Or we could go the other way and be more critical of ourselves than God is. But God's thoughts are the ones that matter. And thankfully, the mind of God has been revealed to us, 2 Corinthians 2, Philippians 2, so that we can consider ourselves from God's perspective. We know we have the mind of God revealed in Scripture. We have the coming judgment day questions, as it were. What's going to be brought up, what's important to God in the Scripture. So we can look at ourselves from God's perspective. Now we know the difference between a thermometer and a thermostat. A thermometer measures temperature, but a thermostat determines temperature. God has the thermometer. We have the thermostat. God measures our spiritual temperature, but we get to determine what that temperature is by the free will that God gave to us, Joshua 24:15. Let's ask and answer 5 penetrating questions under this first point. Now, I won't know if you answered these questions. You won't know if I answered them. But consider them. And I would encourage you to give thought to each of them. Number 1, what is my spiritual temperature? Revelation 3:15-17 speaks of Jesus taking the temperature of churches, or a church in that case, Laodicea. And he said, I would that thou wert hot or cold. Thou art lukewarm. So they weren't completely fallen away from God. They weren't cold and antagonistic. They were not on fire for God. They were somewhere in the middle. They were lukewarm. And he said, I'll spew you out. That was not something that Jesus would tolerate, being in the middle. Now, if I ask you this morning to put where your spiritual temperature is right now, where your relationship with God is right now, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being barely there, 10 being a flaming fire, where would you put it 1 to 10? One preacher asked some of his members, how would you evaluate your spiritual walk with God? And he received different answers. One said, well, it's better some days than others. Another said, well, it's pretty good. But his most common answer was, it's okay. Now, where would you put okay on the scale of 1 to 10? Would okay be a 2? No, it wouldn't. It would not be a 2. Would okay be an 8? No, it wouldn't be that high, would it? Where would okay be? Would it be a 4? Would it be a 6? Would it be a 7? I don't know, but it would be somewhere in the middle of the scale. Now, when we compare that thought with Revelation 3:15, where would it be? Cold? Lukewarm? Hot? Probably in the lukewarm phase. Now, we get to determine if the temperature is a little low in the soul, we can increase that temperature. We can turn it up. We can become more zealous for God. At 1:30 today, we'll talk about 5 ways to increase our spiritual passion in the new year. We're coming up on the last 15 days of this calendar year. We're going to be making resolutions about 2022 if the Lord allows us to see it. And so this is a good time for us to evaluate our lives. This is a good time to make some decisions that will help us to be even stronger in the coming year than we have been in the past year. But here we're talking about penetrating question number 1. What is my spiritual temperature? Number 2, what am I most passionate about? We have perhaps several passions in life. The Bible talks about 3 different kinds of passions. Sinful passions. Philippians 3:6, for instance, Paul said, concerning zeal, persecuting the church. At that stage of his life, he was passionate about something sinful. And most of the times the word passion is used in the New Testament is talking about sinful passions. And some people are very passionate about their sins, and they are addicted to them. They are in love with them. Then there is a middle kind of passion that one may have about insignificant things. And then there is passion for God. And those 3, we are to have no passions that are sinful. We are to have limited passions that are indifferent. And we are to have one great passion for God. Now that middle category, we might think of things like our hobbies, maybe hunting or fishing, sports, our sporting team, maybe the Tigers or the Grizzlies or the Volunteers or the Razorbacks or the Black Bears of Ole Miss, or whoever it is that you set aside time to watch on Saturdays. Or maybe it's a career. I really am passionate about climbing the ladder. Maybe it's money. I want to be a millionaire by the time I'm 35. Maybe it's, vacation, travel, seeing the world. Nothing wrong with any of those things I just mentioned, unless we are more passionate about any of those or a combination of those than we are what goes on in this room on Sundays, what goes on in the plan of work of this congregation when it is presented to the congregation and we begin to make our plans for the year. The gospel meetings are going to be these dates. The VBS is going to be this date. I'm going to be a teacher this year. The youth are going to go to this place to do door knocking on this week, or we're going to be involved in these works this. Do I get excited about that? Or do we think of excuses why I can't be there? Why I won't be able to do that this year? What am I most passionate about? Third penetrating question is, how will people remember me when I'm gone? We can say one thing, but people don't remember what we say so much as they remember who we are. If your funeral was tomorrow and the preacher got up, he would say some nice things about you. He might not have any difficulty coming up with a list of things that he wanted to mention. People and your friends come to the visitation and they would remember things about you. They would talk about some laughs that you shared, some trips that you went on together. They would know what was important in your life. Your family, when they get together in the holidays in a couple of weeks, they would remember you. And they would talk about your passions, what was important to you, what you stood for. What would that be in your case? 3. Or is this 4? Next question. What one thing needs to change for my spiritual passion to increase? Matthew 18 and 9, Jesus said, if thy hand offend thee, cut it off. If your foot offend thee, cut it off. It's better to go through life maimed than to go to hell whole. If your eye offends thee, pluck it out. It is better to go to heaven with one eye, I'm summarizing, than it is to go to hell with both eyes. So the idea in that verse is examining one's life. What's hindering me? What's blocking me? What's a barrier between here and heaven for me? Get rid of that thing, whatever it is, even if it's great, it comes at great personal loss or cost. Now, he's not talking about maiming the body, but he's speaking in hyperbole. He's trying to make the point that this is worth giving up anything for in order to go to heaven. So what one thing would I need to give up? Would it be friends? Would it be a job? Would it be a relationship? Would it be like the rich young ruler, sell all that you have and come and follow me? Matthew 19, 1 through 14, first part of Matthew 19. One thing thou lackest, Jesus told him. And one of the accounts says, he looking on him loved him and said, Jesus loved him so much he wanted him to go to heaven. He said, in order to go to heaven, you're going to have to make some difficult decisions. Because although he had great possessions, his possessions had him. And that was the problem. His heart was with them. And then the last question, penetrating question, is this. How can I keep my spiritual temperature up when I'm in a cold environment? You know, this time of year, the temperature is fluctuating. You know, some days you go out in a short sleeve shirt, and that's great, that's fine. Other days you go out in the short sleeve shirt, and you go back in and you get a sweatshirt or a coat to wear. And if you're going to be working outside, or let's say you're going to be, you have a day when you're going to be working in a meat cooler. You know, you're going to be in and out all day. You're going to dress differently for that situation. You're going to wear a warm toboggan or hat. You're going to maybe have some gloves. You layer up because you're going to be in a cold environment. You make special preparations. Now, what temperature would you assign the place where you work, the people with whom you associate for hours every day? Now, those of us who teach here, what an ideal situation. Now, I'm teaching the first year students now, and their zeal just rubs off on me. And I'm sure that's true of the other teachers. They love to learn. But I recognize that not everybody, most people are not in that situation. It may be the words that you have to endure at work are words that you would not personally say. There are thoughts that are expressed and jokes that are made. You say, well, I don't need to laugh at that. I don't need to think about that. So if you're going to be in a situation at school or work or in your family like that, some special preparations need to be made. You're going to be in a cold environment. You don't want your temperature to go down. Matthew 24:12 says, when iniquity abounds, the love of some will wax cold. And that principle is true in our lives. So, how can I keep my spiritual? Well, I need to put on more clothes. Colossians 3 uses that idea of putting off sinful things and putting on virtues of the soul. That's Colossians 3:8 and 5 through 9. You also see it in the passage that deals with the spiritual armor of Ephesians 6:11. Put on these things. So before you go out, it's going to be a war today. I'm going to have temptations today. I'm going to need my sword. I'm going to need my breastplate. I'm going to need my helmet. I want to need my feet shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace. My loins girded about with truth. I need to put that on to stay warm in a cold environment. But let's move into a second area, a second direction. Look up and examine self from God's perspective. Number 2, turn around and look back. Look back at the cross. Jesus said, and if I be lifted up, I will draw all men unto me. There's heaven's magnet for the human soul. The sacrifice made on that hill 2,000 years ago, it still grips us. It still hits us in the heart. It still attracts us to the one who gave himself there innocently and vicariously so that we might not die and go to the bad place, so that we might be able to be with God in heaven. He said, I will take the penalty for your sin. I will pay it. I will suffer for you. You don't have to suffer because I love you. And that is magnetic. That has a drawing power. Now, that's what drew you to Christianity in the first place, isn't it? when you heard that story, when you read those verses, when you became convicted that that was true, you said, my life must change. And you obeyed the gospel. You left a sinful life behind and you began to walk a new path. But that's not something that's only in our past. You know, God so constructed Christianity that we can never go more than 7 days without going back to the cross. Because we just did that, didn't we? We just went back. In fact, this entire sermon you could outline around the Lord's Supper because all 4 directions are there. But right now we're talking about looking back. C.S. Lewis said, Christianity, if false, is of no importance. If true, is of the utmost importance. The one thing that Christianity cannot be is of moderate importance. I'm either in or I'm out, but there's no middle ground. Jesus said, you either love me or you hate me. You're either on my side or you're on the other side. There is no middle ground in Christianity. And when we go back to the cross and we stand there and we, in our mind's eye, view what it is that happened there. And during the Lord's Supper, I was doing this. I don't know if you're a visual person. I'm a visual person, so I could read something and see it. Maybe you're like that. It's reading from John's account. I could hear the shouts made in his direction. He saved others. He can't even save himself. Hey, come down from the cross. We'll believe you. Jesus looked over at his mother. I wonder how her face looked right then. The love of her life being murdered on public display. Jesus nodded at John, we think, the disciple whom he loved. Behold thy mother, behold thy son. He took her away. Can you see her? Maybe him put his arm around her and say, come on, let's go home. And then I turn my attention to the one on the cross. I see that protruding nail and just a little blood bubbling or dripping from the end of it. One drop. Another drop. I glance at the other hand and there's another nail. And it's all bloody too. And I look up at his head. And I see a grimace on his face as he grits his teeth to bear the unbearable pain of a crucifixion. And the crown of thorns is still there. They took the clothes off, but the crown they left. And I see that blood dry because it's been there a while, but there's a lot of it. You don't have a head wound without a lot of blood. Even a cut as you're shaving, as all of us men know, will bleed profusely because there's so much blood going to the brain continuously. Here are lacerations around the scalp. Oh, he's bled. It's dried down. It's dripped down on his face. It's probably dried now. It's been there a while. But those thorns are black with blood at this point. I see his feet as he tries to push up to get the air out and the sweat. And I hear the moans. Could you have nails in your body while you're alive and not moan? And I hear him say, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. And then ultimately, he shouts, unusual on the cross because there's not much wind, but he shouts, it is finished. And he wills himself to die. You know, unbelievers have trouble believing in the resurrection. Believers have no trouble believing in the resurrection. If anything, it's more challenging to believe in the cross and the resurrection. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, the what? Life died. How do you kill life? He wills himself to die. That's what he did. Go back. You know, you don't walk away from Calvary the same person that went there. And when your love to Christ grows weak, go back. And the Lord's Supper, during those 6 or 7 minutes it takes to take the Lord's Supper, it's really not enough time, but it's a good start. Why not read the chapters? Matthew 21 to 28, Mark 11 to 16, Luke 19 to 24, John 12 to 21. Those chapters, large sections of each book, take us through the crucifixion. And read it as if you never read it before. Number 3, what direction, what way do I go in order to renew my spirit? Project yourself forward to the judgment day. Think about Matthew 25, 31 to 33, which is one of the 2 best chapters, maybe the best chapter in the New Testament. Think about the judgment day, the other being Revelation 20. But in this one it says, before him shall be gathered all nations. So can you picture that? Jesus uplifted on his throne, and before him they're bringing in, the angels are bringing in all the people who have ever lived. Billions of people. I mean, you cannot see any of the edges of this crowd because there are so many people, all the way from Adam and Eve down to the last baby born, just before God said, go bring my family home. Everybody is there, and I'm there. Maybe I'm in the back. Maybe I'm in the middle. Maybe toward the front. But it really doesn't matter because everybody has a turn. Each one has an individual turn. In fact, I've circled 2 words in that passage of Matthew 25, 31. I think it's verse 31. Gathered all nations. So that's the aggregate. Everybody's there. But then there is the individual, the sheep that's set aside with the sheep, and the goat with the goats. So you have both aspects in that passage, and both are true. We will be there with everybody, but it will be just like we're the only one there when it's our turn because we step forward. I don't know how that plays out exactly. I sometimes think about it in terms of Achan's sin and Joshua is at chapter 6 or so. We just studied that. But you have Achan who's sinned, but he hasn't fessed up. And so they begin to figure out who did it, and they divide by tribes, and then by families, and then by individual family units. Well, maybe it'll be like that at Judgment Day. Can you imagine? Everybody from Tennessee, step forward. You're next. Memphis, over here. Germantown. Forest Hill Church of Christ, right here. Mosier family, you're next. Keith Mosier, you're first. Everybody in the world looking at one person. But none of that matters because that person is looking at the one who's opened the books. Now, there is no pleading the fifth. There is no sane person claiming insanity. There's no statute of limitations. There's no somehow talking my way out of truth. No, truth will be standing before me. And he will have his books opened. The word of truth which he gave me to prepare me for it. The book of the deeds of my life, the book of life with names in it. Now, if you're sort of disinterested in this part of the lesson, and it's about the time that we tend to turn the preacher down a little bit, remember, I'm talking about you. And I'm talking about me. Because I'm in Matthew 25:31. You're there too. And when I get a hold of that, it will sober me up overnight. When I know that my today's actions will be judged tomorrow, my words will be spoken out loud before the gathered crowd, my thoughts hidden to all will be known then. The secrets of my heart. Romans 2:16. It will guide me into a direction that I will not be ashamed of. You see, project forward, look ahead, and that will increase passion. So I want to be ready for that day. And number 4, look inside and examine motivation. The Lord doesn't look at the outside, does He? That's not to say that our deeds are unimportant or that what we wear is insignificant. No, those, in that sense, yes, but those are only a reflection of what's on the inside. 1 Samuel 16:7, when David was chosen to be king, the Lord looks on the heart. So what's in my heart? Maybe nobody else knows that, at least not wholly, completely. But I know it. It's my heart. In order to be a faithful, passionate Christian for the long haul, 2 things are required: purpose and passion. Purpose is the head. Knowledge, wisdom, intention. Passion is the heart. Zeal, love. You could say that purpose points us in the direction of heaven, and passion propels us there. Now, passion without purpose doesn't do anybody any good. The Jews had that. Zeal without knowledge. Romans 10:2. Somebody said it this way. Purpose without passion is like a river without any water. You got the form, it's just not going anywhere. But passion without purpose is like a river with no banks. Neither one is useful. But when you have purpose and passion married, you have a river flowing in its banks that's navigable. The fish live within it. You can go from destination 1B or destination A to destination B. What about passion? I'll just motivation. Let me give you this briefly to consider, and we won't have time to discuss it. There are 4 motivations that miss the mark. That may be, it's possible to do the right thing from the wrong motivation. 1 Corinthians 13, 1-3. So there are 4 motivations. None of these is acceptable to God for my good life, good deeds in my life. 1, money. Paul said, I coveted no man's gold, silver, or array, or apparel. Acts 20:34. Glory. 1 Corinthians 9:16, Paul said, woe is me if I preach not the gospel. Esteem or prestige or status. When the Pharisees wanted to give or to pray, they would make sure somebody was watching before they dropped it in, or before they bowed on the street corner That's a strategic location. I can be seen from this direction, and I can be seen from this direction. Look, everybody, I'm praying. God said, you have a reward if people noticed you. So that's not a proper motivation. Nor is ease. Amos 6:1, one of them that are at ease in Zion. None of those are proper motives. But the proper motives all involve love. Love for God. Matthew 22:36 through 40. We touched on it earlier. 2, love for Scripture. Psalm 119:97. Oh, how I love thy law. It's my meditation all the day. Love for souls. Romans 9:2 and 3. Paul said, I'd be willing to be lost for my brethren to be, according to the flesh, to be saved. He loved them that much. So there are the motivations. Well, our time is down to the last 2 minutes. The invitation is now to be extended. The song will be sung. If you're a Christian and you're a faithful Christian, we would urge you to sing and to encourage others, but not to make any public response. Public response would be for any who are not Christians but desire to become a Christian. You could be baptized in water for the forgiveness of your sins in this service. And your spiritual journey to heaven would begin at 11:35-ish and last until your last day here, when you would be ushered into the next world. That's exciting to think about. If you haven't been a faithful Christian, you say, my zeal's not good, my passion for God's not what I wish it were, and it's led me into sin, and people know it. I've been missing services, and I haven't been setting the example for my coworkers and my class, even my family, that I really need to, and I want to start over. And God lets us do that. He lets us make a U-turn. I'm going the wrong direction, but now I'm going to go in the right direction, and we have the ability to change based on decision and with God's help to become the person He wants us to become. But that begins with a decision. It begins with prayer. Acts 8:22 and James 5:16. If that be your desire, we'll be happy to pray with you, for you, and encourage you if you'll let that be known. If either of those is your desire, you may come while we stand and as we sing.